Tonight we're slipping back over 1,000 years into the damp, smoky heart of a Viking longhouse. You're not a warrior or a king, not tonight. You're just you. One of the many souls who call this great timbered hall home. Your day won't involve dragon ships or raids. It's more about goat poop and wooden spoons. But don't worry, it's still a bit heroic. You lie there on your straw-stuffed mattress, limbs tangled with a sibling or three, and your nose dangerously close to a cousin's foot. The air is cold enough to see your breath but thick with the comforting scent of smoke, sheep grease, and last night's stew. The fire at the center of the longhouse smolders quietly, barely holding off the morning chill. A soft clatter of wood overhead means the wind is nudging at the thatched roof again. There's a rhythmic drip from the beam near the entrance, snowmelt finding its way through the patch someone swore they fixed last week. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always love seeing our sleepy little global village. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your eyelids flutter open. There's a foot in your face and a chicken softly cooing somewhere it absolutely should not be. You shift slowly, careful not to bump into the clay oil lamp teetering near your bedding. The longhouse around you creaks with age, its beams blackened with years of hearth smoke and the occasional bonk from an over-enthusiastic axe swing. The first sounds of the day are never gentle. Someone's coughing on the far side of the house, deep and phlegmy. Your mother mutters a prayer to the easier while poking at the coals with a charred stick. The fire hisses and spits like it resents being disturbed. She throws in a few dried birch bark curls and an armload of twigs, and within moments, the central hearth crackles with a cheerful flame. You feel the warmth reach out and touch your face like a sleepy dog nosing for attention. The light from the low winter sun is just starting to seep through the smoke hole above. It doesn't so much illuminate as it participates, casting golden streaks through the haze and turning dust motes into tiny glowing spirits. You squint, then remember you were supposed to help with the fire this morning. Oops. Getting up means untangling yourself from woolen blankets, a hide or two, and the warm shoulder of your brother, who growls in protest and rolls away, pulling most of the warmth with him. Your feet touch the packed earth floor and immediately regret everything. It's cold, gritty, and definitely hosting something unidentifiable from last night's dinner. You hobble to the side, find your linen tunic, which is still damp, because of course it is, and slip it over your head. Your cloak smells like damp moss and someone else's sweat, but it's better than freezing. You yank on your leather boots, which you stuffed with hay last night in a desperate act of insulation. This morning, still cold, still damp, still definitely harboring a tiny rock you forgot to remove. People are stirring now. Little bodies scamper toward the hearth, arms crossed tight for warmth. Elders mumble to themselves and squint at the fire like it personally insulted them. Outside, you hear the faint whinny of a horse and the unmistakable shriek of a goat that probably got stuck in something stupid again. Always the goats. Historians still argue whether Viking longhouses were mainly one big room or included semi-private partitions for families. In this version, you're in the open-plan variety, just a long, smoky rectangle of communal life, organized chaos, and deeply questionable smells. As you help hang a pot of thin barley gruel over the fire, your stomach gurgles in anticipation or protest. Hard to tell. Meals are humble. You ladle out portions into carved wooden bowls, dodging a toddler who seems determined to trip you. The porridge is lumpy and vaguely grey, but there's a spoonful of last summer's dried berries in yours. A win. You plop down on a fur-covered bench and dig in. Someone farts. No one acknowledges it. This is normal. Around you, morning gossip begins. Aunt Brynhild is still mad about the missing cheese wheel. Your cousin insists he saw a fox with glowing eyes near the woodshed. And your grandfather, eyes still closed, starts reciting part of a saga about a man who got turned into a seal for stealing from a god. No one questions him. That story changes every week. It's a quiet chaos, this early hour. A few chickens strut indoors like they own the place, pecking at crumbs and occasionally trying to sit in people's laps. Someone sneezes violently and blames it on spirits. Your younger sibling is licking a spoon they found on the floor. Again. You make a mental note never to use that one. Then comes the first official task of the day, going outside. The heavy wooden door groans open, letting in a blast of icy wind that slaps you awake like a disapproving aunt. You brace yourself, step over a sleepy dog, and push into the grey light of morning. Outside, the world is muffled by frost. Breath fogs out in front of you as your boots crunch across frozen earth. The longhouse looms behind you like a giant's hollowed ribcage, its timber bones steaming faintly in the cold. Chickens scatter, ducks complain, and somewhere in the distance, a raven caws like it's in charge of everything. Your first job. Releasing the animals. You unlatch the pen and immediately regret it. Goats explode out like woolly cannonballs. One slams into your knee. Another starts chewing your cloak. The pig just looks at you like it's judging your life choices. It probably is. Still, you wouldn't trade this for anything. The fire warmed inside. The icy slap of morning. The absurdity of that goose, who definitely holds a grudge. It's all yours. All of it, smoke, straw, siblings, and all. You stomp back inside with goat drool on your cloak and a new appreciation for solid walls. The door thuds shut behind you, muting the wind. Instantly, your cheeks feel the kiss of heat from the hearth, and your boots start steaming, never a good sign, but at least it means they're thawing. People are up now. Fully. There's a bustling rhythm to the longhouse as if the building itself wakes with the people inside it. The eldest aunt is already giving orders while somehow not moving from her stool. It's a skill. One of the kids drags a bucket bigger than their torso toward the hearth, spilling half of it. A teenage cousin groans theatrically while hauling in firewood. You try to look busy by rearranging some logs. It works. Barely. Chores begin before your body fully catches up with being awake. It's just how things are. No lazy scrolling. No snooze button. Just you, a tangle of responsibilities, and maybe a small existential crisis over how much dung a single cow can produce in one night. Spoiler, a lot. You grab a clay bucket and head toward the side pen, dodging siblings like an obstacle course. The goats have wandered off to bully the chickens, and the pig has wedged herself in the doorway, unmoving, as always. You nudge her with your boot. She doesn't even blink. You go around. Milking time. The goats aren't thrilled, but then again, neither are you. The stool wobbles. Your hands are cold. The goat kicks. You mutter under your breath in your best serious voice, threatening to trade her for stew meat. She gives you the side eye, but stays still. You win. Barely. Milking is weirdly meditative once your fingers get numb enough to stop feeling the pain. The frosty air nips at your ears and seeps down your collar. Your breath clouds in front of you like ghost whispers. Overhead, the sky shifts from slate to pearl, and birds start gossiping in the thatch. A dog trots past with a bone twice its size, looking proud and slightly suspicious. Aunt Brynhild suddenly yells from inside, something about the cooking fire being too low. You flinch. Everyone flinches. That woman has the lungs of a battle horn. You carry the still warm milk back in, gripping it tight. It sloshes slightly, and you mutter a prayer to Thor that you don't spill it. Again. Inside, your uncle is blowing on the fire like it owes him money. Your brother is arguing with a cousin about who left the door open and let the ancestors out. You silently slide the milk onto the prep table and retreat. Smooth. No one notices. Except the chicken, who's back and giving you the evil eye again. You change tasks before anyone can assign you one, classic Viking survival tactic. You grab a broom made of bundled birch twigs and start sweeping, half-heartedly but convincingly. The floor's packed earth, so you're mostly pushing dust and straw into one corner, but it's the act that matters. Someone nods approvingly. You feel like a fraud, but a warm fraud. Here's a thing, historians still argue whether Viking longhouses were cleaned daily or more, occasionally. Your longhouse, let's say selectively hygienic. There's a dead mouse near the wall. You politely pretend not to see it. Above you, the smoke hole lets in light and lets out exactly none of the smoke. It gathers near the ceiling beams, a lazy ghost swirling over carved rafters and hanging bundles of herbs. Lavender, nettle, rosemary. Not just for flavor, they ward off spirits, bad smells, and possibly nosy neighbors. You glance over to see your older sister sharpening a knife on a whetstone with deadly precision. She doesn't look up, but she knows you're watching. You offer her a chunk of dried apple as a peace offering. She accepts it without smiling. Still counts. At this point, someone spilled something into the hearth and the fire's protesting with loud crackles. Sparks spit up like tiny angry fireflies. A kid squeals and runs into a bench. You lift your foot just in time to avoid a collision. Chaos. Normal. Then comes the part no one likes, chamber pot duty. You try to act very busy sweeping a wall. Doesn't work. You get chosen. Of course. You haul the reeking clay vessels out to the side pit, gagging softly all the way. They smell like defeat and something unspeakable. One slips slightly in your hand. You swear loudly, but only in your head. There are children present. Quirky fact break. In some Viking settlements, archaeologists have found latrine layers beneath the floors, proof that sometimes, folks didn't even bother going outside. You eye your cousin suspiciously. It would explain a lot. Dumping the pots is a delicate ballet of speed, balance, and not breathing too deeply. Once done, you set the pots upside down to dry and practically run back inside, gasping for air like a man returned from war. You pass your aunt on the way in. She gives you a long, knowing look and hands you a damp cloth. You're not sure whether to thank her or cry. Back in the longhouse, things are oddly calm. For a minute. The gruel has been scraped clean. A toddler is gnawing on a wooden spoon like a tiny berserker. Someone's tuning a lyre, plucking out a melody that sounds suspiciously like last week's drinking song. You settle near the fire again, wrapping your cloak tighter. Outside, the wind howls against the walls, but inside there's warmth, movement, purpose. Your fingers still smell faintly of goat. You ignore it. You look up at the rafters where drying fish dangle, lightly swaying with the air currents. Someone coughs behind you. Someone else laughs softly at a private joke. And in the far corner, your grandfather clears his throat and begins a story you've heard a dozen times but still kind of love. So it goes. The longhouse breathes with you. The day has barely begun, and you're already tired. But also, oddly, content. You survived goat duty, chamber pots, and the gaze of Brynhild. Not bad for one cold hour in a Viking morning. You're still hungry. You know you're not supposed to be, but let's face it, barley porridge with a whisper of sour goat milk and exactly 2 dried berries doesn't really qualify as a feast. Your stomach gurgles again, loudly this time, and your sister shoots you a glare like you personally offended Odin. It's breakfast time. Or rather, second breakfast, which in Viking households isn't quite as charming as it sounds. You know better than to expect honeyed pastries or roasted boar. Here, the morning meal is practical, utilitarian, and, how shall we say, soul-crushingly repetitive. You settle into your spot on the long wooden bench beside the fire. Everyone has their spot. Woe to the child who forgets this and ends up sitting where Uncle Rurik always sits. You'd think the man was carved from stone the way he reacts. You still remember last winter when your cousin sat in his spot and nearly got a spoon to the forehead. Aunt Brynhild ladles out the day's main event, another round of that lovable grey gruel, but now with the added bonus of chopped onion. You'd complain, but your mouth is already watering. One of the toddlers is whining because they wanted more berries. There are no more berries. It's January. The only fruit in the longhouse right now is a shriveled apple that's mostly mold and memories. You eat with a carved wooden spoon, lovingly whittled by your father years ago. It has a dragon etched into the handle, but half of it's been chewed off, likely by a sibling or, based on recent evidence, possibly a goat. You slurp the gruel. It tastes like wet wood and regret, but it's warm, and warmth counts for a lot in this season of endless grey skies and frost-chapped fingers. Someone passes around a chunk of leftover flatbread. It's hard enough to qualify as a weapon, but you sawed off a bite with your teeth anyway. You chew for a while. A long while. Eventually, it softens enough to swallow. Across the fire, your grandfather is muttering a prayer before biting into a salted fish so pungent you can smell it from your side of the room. You try not to look. You fail. His toothless smile is disturbingly enthusiastic. A brief moment of stillness settles over the longhouse. People eating, chewing, thinking. Not thinking too hard. A baby hiccups. Somewhere behind you, the family dog starts chewing on something that is definitely not food. No one stops him. He's earned it. Mainstream historical fact incoming. Viking meals were simple and seasonal, often centered around grains, preserved fish, and what root vegetables hadn't rotted yet. Mealtime wasn't about pleasure, it was fuel. If you had meat, it was likely smoked or dried. If you had dairy, it was probably sour. If you had beer, it was weak and warm. If you had any complaints, you kept them to yourself unless you wanted a firm boot in the rear. You finish your bowl and lick the spoon, mostly out of habit. Your mother raises an eyebrow but doesn't scold you. She's distracted, looking over the household supplies and mumbling to herself about how the smoked meat stocks are dangerously low. You try not to panic. No meat equals more gruel. More gruel equals existential despair. Just as you think the worst is over, your brother nudges you and whispers that you're on dung shoveling duty. You whisper back that he should check the chore slate. He does. You're both wrong. Turns out he's on dung shoveling duty. You smile. He does not. Another kid gets caught chewing bark. Not because they're hungry, but because they're bored. You make a mental note. Boredom will get you eating tree parts. Or marrying your cousin. Or both. Fringe historical tidbit time. Some researchers suggest Viking children were often barefoot inside the longhouse even in winter because shoes were expensive and precious. You glance down at your own feet in their patched leather boots, suddenly grateful. You also pull your cloak tighter and shuffle closer to the fire. Just in case. The clatter of bowls signals the end of breakfast. Dishes are cleaned with bits of moss and sand, scrubbed until vaguely acceptable. Someone offers to help and is immediately handed a full stack of bowls. Rookie mistake. The noise level rises again. Morning digestion apparently triggers loud opinions. Your uncle launches into a spirited debate with your aunt about whether the neighbor's sheep are cursed or just dumb. Your mother loudly insists no one is sacrificing anything to fix the wool problem again. A teenager declares he saw a raven yesterday and now he's pretty sure he's a seer. Everyone rolls their eyes, except your grandmother, who stares at him like he just cracked open a cursed runed stone. Historians still argue whether Viking families ate together regularly or more informally throughout the day. Your family? Loud, chaotic, and very communal. Meals aren't just about food, they're about status, gossip, thinly veiled insults, and the occasional ominous prophecy. You drift toward the fire again, drawn by the glow. The flames are higher now, licking the sides of the iron cauldron still bubbling faintly from breakfast's remains. You stare into the coals and think about nothing. Absolutely nothing. It's peaceful. Then a spoon hits you in the back of the head. Not hard, but enough to snap you out of it. You turn. It was your cousin. You throw it back. It misses and lands in the dog's water bowl. You both nod solemnly and pretend nothing happened. A lull settles in. Bellies are full. The chores will pile up again soon, but for a brief moment, the longhouse hums with quiet satisfaction. Fire. Family. Questionable fish. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders and lean back against a supporting post. And then Aunt Brynhild claps her hands and announces that it's time to clean the ash out of the hearth. Everyone groans. You groan the loudest. It's shaping up to be another perfect Viking morning. Outside again. The door thunks shut behind you, and instantly your ears catch the wind's familiar whistle, sharp, relentless, like it's trying to sneak down your collar and gossip with your bones. You huff and pull your cloak tighter, already dreading the next hour of mud, livestock, and that weird smell coming from the chicken coop that no one wants to deal with. This is outdoor chore hour. Not glorious battle stuff, mind you. No axes or war cries or poetic death speeches. Just honest, undignified work. You trudge across the trampled yard, the ground more mush than soil after weeks of freeze-thaw cycles. Your boot sinks with a wet schlorp and you freeze, praying it's just water. You pull it free. It's not. Definitely not. The chickens see you and immediately start complaining, like you owe them rent. One pecks your boot. Another tries to hop onto the fence and falls off. You can't help but chuckle. Chickens are proof that even Odin has a sense of humor. Your first task, mucking out the cow pen. Yes, it smells exactly how you'd imagine. Probably worse. The cow blinks at you with infinite apathy. She's chewing something, possibly hay, possibly your dignity. You grab the wooden pitchfork, grit your teeth, and start heaving piles of manure into the compost heap behind the pen. Steam rises from each load like it's haunted. Probably is. Mainstream historical fact break: Viking farms relied heavily on animal husbandry, and livestock were vital. Cows, goats, pigs, chickens, they weren't just food sources, they were status symbols. Wealth wasn't just measured in silver or swords, it was counted in hooves, horns, and how many animals you could cram into your winter shelter without losing your mind. You lean on your pitchfork for a second, catching your breath. The sun, a pale disk barely making it through the clouds, casts a soft glow on the snow-dusted roofs of nearby huts. Somewhere, a hammer pings against metal in the blacksmith's forge, rhythmic and distant. Closer by, the pig lets out a squeal and rolls dramatically in the dirt like it's in a saga of its own. You nod respectfully. She's the main character now. There's a little break in the pen wall, nothing serious, but enough for a determined goat to squeeze through. You grab a chunk of wood and jam it into place. The goat watches you with its rectangular pupils, plotting. You know this game. You've played it before. You will lose. You move on to the chicken area. It's more or less a fenced square with several escape routes and zero regard for boundaries. You toss them a handful of barley and hope it distracts them long enough to refill their water trough. It doesn't. One flaps onto your arm. Another bites your earlobe. You're now in a feathery war zone. You mutter something unkind about poultry, and the wind carries it away, probably straight to the gods. As you duck under the low-hanging eaves of the coop, something drops on your shoulder. Not a blessing. You stand up quickly, bonk your head on a beam, and accidentally kick over a bucket. Classic. Time for a change of pace. You head to the woodpile and start stacking logs, trying to find ones that haven't soaked through. It's like picking out decent apples from a barrel of disappointment. You eventually get enough for a few days and lug them back toward the longhouse, arms burning, the stack wobbling precariously. Your cousin sees you struggling and offers to help, which mostly means walking behind you and loudly critiquing your balance. Halfway back, you pass by the open-air animal shelter. One of the oxen snorts and shakes its head, flicking frost from its ears. You pause and scratch behind its horns. It leans into it, snuffling like a sleepy bear. You smile. It's the most affection you've gotten today. Quirky historical tidbit: some Viking farms had animals sharing the longhouse space during the winter, not just near the house, in the house. Warm bodies were warmth, even if they smelled like the world's worst stew. Your family draws the line at goats inside, but honestly, not by much. You look up toward the nearby forest line. Thin, skeletal trees sway under the weight of a light snow. You swear you see movement, just a flicker. A bird. A shadow. A forest spirit come to judge your posture. You blink, and it's gone. You hurry back. It's probably nothing. Probably. Back inside the fence, the goose sees you. This goose. This one specific goose has hated you since last spring when you accidentally spilled water on its nest. It honks once, slowly, like a threat. You take a long step sideways. It mirrors you. You grab a stick. It narrows its beady eyes. The standoff continues until your sister opens the door and yells at you to stop playing with the goose and bring in the firewood. Historians still argue whether Viking livestock were more free-roaming or regularly penned. Based on today's chaos, you're leaning toward uncontained mayhem. Goats on roofs, pigs in the path, chickens, everywhere. The only animals that stay where they're meant to are the ones who've found the food stores. You suspect the cat, whom you haven't seen all morning, is currently asleep in the flour barrel. Again. You drag the logs into the house and drop them beside the hearth with a thud. The fire crackles in appreciation, or maybe alarm. Your sister tosses a few logs on top, then hands you a cup of weak ale as thanks. You nod. It's warmish. It's sour. It's perfect. You lean against the beam, breathing hard. Your boots are now covered in things best left unexamined. Your cloak smells like damp chicken and cow. Your hair is wind-snarled and straw-streaked. But your heart, steady. Your fingers, warm. Your stomach, slightly less angry. You survived another hour of outdoor bluster. Even the goose didn't win this time. You call that a Viking victory. By mid-morning, your hands are stiff, your boots squelch slightly with each step, and your mood is hovering somewhere between mildly heroic and permanently resentful of chickens. You deserve a break. Unfortunately, that's not how longhouse life works. The firewood's in, the animals are fed, and now comes the delicate art of not stabbing someone during communal crafting hour. You settle cross-legged near the hearth. This is where everyone migrates once the chores take a brief pause. You watch your cousin snatch a seat before your grandfather claims it with his impressive elbow span. Smart. A basket of bones sits nearby, some clean and white, others still a bit fresh. You grab a half-carved needle and start smoothing its edges with a stone. Nearby, your older sister is weaving wool thread into a tangled approximation of what might become socks, or a hat, or a very unfortunate baby blanket. She won't say. She also won't let you touch it. Today is for making useful things with your hands: bone needles, antler buttons, leather ties, little wooden dolls for the kids. Someone's carving a hair comb. Someone else is carving a spearhead. You're not sure who's preparing for a battle and who's just very angry about the weather. You glance around the fire circle. It's a quiet, determined crowd, mostly women, a few boys too young for fieldwork, and a couple of men who claim they've injured their backs chopping wood but are suspiciously good at sitting very still. Mainstream fact: Viking households were highly self-sufficient. Almost everything was made by hand: tools, clothes, household items. Everyone learned to craft something, even if your true skill was just looking very busy while doing absolutely nothing. You are a master of that. You keep filing the needle. Your fingers are numb, your eyes sting from the smoke, but there's something weirdly peaceful about this part of the day. The scrape of bone against stone. The gentle crackle of the hearth. The occasional sniffle. The soothing sound of someone muttering about how things were better before they invented turnip stew. Across the room, your cousin is pretending not to stare at the girl carving a spoon near the far wall. She's definitely noticed, and she's definitely ignoring him. You nudge him with your foot. He kicks you back. Then you both go back to pretending you weren't involved in anything at all. Fringe historical tidbit: archaeologists have found intricately decorated bone and wood items in Norse settlements, suggesting that even mundane tools were personalized and artistic. A spoon wasn't just a spoon, it might have your initials, a protective rune, or a dragon eating a fish that's also a different, angrier dragon. You test your needle's sharpness on your sleeve. Too sharp. You bleed a little. You put it in the finished pile anyway. Tradition. One of the toddlers stumbles over to the work circle, dragging a wooden cart full of nothing in particular. She's wearing someone's hat, 2 left shoes, and no pants. You help her tie her cloak shut with a strip of linen. She rewards you by immediately sneezing on your face. You go back to crafting with a little extra humility. Then comes the theft. Subtle, sneaky, and utterly predictable. You reach for your bone-handled carving knife and it's gone. You look around. No one meets your gaze. Everyone knows who took it, but Viking etiquette dictates that you don't start a knife fight unless you're really sure. So you wait. And you plot. And you mentally add retrieve stolen knife to your ever-growing list of afternoon side quests. Outside, the wind picks up again, rattling the wall beams. Someone adds more logs to the fire. The smoke rises thick and sweet-smelling. Someone must have tossed juniper on the flames. It's a little ritual, meant to purify the air and possibly drive off whatever spirit made the toddler sneeze like that. You pause your carving to sip from a cup of watered ale. It tastes like slightly sour bread, but it's warm. Across from you, your grandmother is muttering runes under her breath, plucking tufts of wool into thread with deft fingers. Her hands are wrinkled, cracked, stronger than yours will ever be. You don't interrupt. Historians still argue whether daily crafting was a formal part of Viking domestic structure or more improvised based on need. Your experience says it's both. Sometimes you're making socks because it's practical. Sometimes you're making a bone necklace because someone told you a ghost cursed your old one. A shout comes from the back of the longhouse. Your aunt has just found someone's hoarded chunk of cheese hidden under a fur rug. There's immediate panic. You casually slide your unfinished carving under your leg and pretend you're focused on your stitchwork. You are absolutely not the cheese bandit. Probably. Your older brother enters the longhouse, stomping snow from his boots and announcing that the barley wagon is stuck in the mud again. A few groans ripple through the room. You all silently agree not to deal with that just yet. You finish shaping your needle. It's a little crooked, a little too sharp, and kind of beautiful. You slide it into the household stash near the wall and feel a little proud. You're contributing. You're slightly bleeding. You're basically a Viking now. Someone nudges your shoulder, your cousin, holding your carving knife with a smug grin. You snatch it back, roll your eyes, and offer him a piece of jerky as a peace offering. He takes it and immediately chokes on it. Justice. The fire crackles again, and a light snow begins outside. Through the small window slits, you can see flakes drifting sideways like sleepy ash. You lean back on your hands and watch as your family continues their work, shaping things, fixing things, creating order out of the long, grey hours of winter. You could almost fall asleep like this. The warmth, the rhythm, the way the knife fits perfectly in your hand again. Almost. Time has a strange way of folding inside a Viking longhouse. You look up from your half-finished bone spoon and suddenly everyone's standing again. It's midday, or close enough for someone to yell, "Eat now, argue later," which is the closest thing to a lunch bell you're going to get. You stretch your aching shoulders and stand up, knees popping like you're 3 times your age. The longhouse gets louder, wooden bowls thud onto the table, spoons clatter, someone's elbowing someone else over who gets to sit closest to the stew pot. You shuffle into the fray, weaving through the usual minefield of dog tails, toddler detritus, and one guy napping exactly where everyone needs to walk. Classic Eric. On today's menu, smoked herring, flatbread hard enough to serve as a roof tile, and a questionable dollop of mashed turnip. You get your share and sit down next to your uncle, who immediately starts bragging about how he once wrestled a bear with just his bare hands and bad intentions. You nod like that sounds entirely reasonable, even though everyone knows it was probably a badger, and even that might be generous. You dip your flatbread into the turnip mush, trying to soften it before it cracks your molars. The herring is salty, chewy, and blessedly flavorful compared to breakfast. You savor each bite, ignoring the distinct possibility that this fish has been in the smokehouse since last solstice. Mainstream historical fact: Viking meals were generally communal, centered around stews, dried fish, preserved meats, and flatbreads made from barley or rye. Lunch wasn't always elaborate, but it was hearty enough to get you through another round of soul-numbing chores. Food preservation was everything, especially in winter. Salted fish and dried meat. Lifesavers. Fermented shark. Let's not talk about that. The mood during meals is predictably chaotic. Someone spills their ale. Someone else tries to sneak a second helping and gets slapped with a spoon. Your aunt passive-aggressively reminds your mother that her batch of flatbread hasn't gone moldy yet, unlike some people's. You chew quietly, pretending not to exist. Then the talk turns to sagas. Your grandfather always picks this moment, mouth full, beard dripping fish oil, to begin a story. Today's tale involves a warrior who single-handedly fought off a troll invasion by shouting rude poetry and wielding a flaming turnip. The kids are entranced. The adults are silently trying to decide whether this is a metaphor or just senility. You're leaning toward both. Fringe historical tidbit: some Viking stories were designed to be passed down orally during meals, equal parts entertainment and cultural education. Heroes, monsters, family lineage, and just enough gore to keep the little ones wide-eyed. Occasionally, someone would throw in a real historical event, just to keep things spicy. Mid-chew, your little brother spills his entire bowl of turnip mash into your lap. You freeze. He freezes. The table freezes. Then someone laughs. Then everyone laughs. You scrape it off with your spoon and declare it's a new fashion trend. Your uncle offers you a strip of moss to clean up, which is frankly more insult than solution. Despite the noise, the smoke, and the relentless scent of salted fish, there's a certain rhythm to mealtime you've grown to appreciate. It's messy, loud, a little passive-aggressive, but it's yours. Your clan. Your chaos. Even the turnips are starting to feel nostalgic. The meal starts winding down. People begin stacking their bowls or licking them clean, depending on how much shame they're carrying that day. You spot your cousin trying to hide the fact that he dropped a whole fish into the straw. You say nothing. You're saving that for leverage later. Historians still argue whether midday meals were formal affairs or more casual grazing periods. Judging by the flatbread crumbs now embedded in your cloak, you'd say, yes. Formal chaos. Someone suddenly remembers that your roof is leaking again. Cue the unsolicited advice. You get. It's the pitch angle. You need better thatch. It's a punishment from the land spirits. Just move to another longhouse. You thank no one and continue eating your now cold herring in dignified silence. The conversation shifts toward practical matters. Who's going to check the traps in the woods? Who saw a wolf near the pasture? Whether Sigurd's daughter really married that fisherman, or if she's just hiding in the barn again. Everyone chimes in. Everyone knows someone. Everyone knows better. You glance toward the rafters where smoked herbs hang in neat bundles. Thyme, angelica, maybe something suspiciously psychedelic. The scent blends with the fish and fire and wool and yes, the faintest trace of goat. Of course. Someone starts humming a slow, low tune about the sea. You join in, softly. The kind of song that's been sung 100 winters. It loops in your head long after the last note fades. Then the toddler next to you drops a spoon down someone's boot, and the spell is broken. People start drifting away from the table, wiping hands on cloaks or the dog, depending on proximity. Your older sister carries the empty stew pot back to the hearth, scraping up the last crispy bits for herself. A well-earned reward. You admire the move. You linger for a bit, chewing the final bite of bread, staring into the fire, listening to the low drone of conversation. Someone farts. No one comments. Another toddler faceplants into a sheepskin. Everyone nods approvingly. And that's lunch. Not glamorous. Not poetic. But oddly, perfect. You stretch your legs, brush the crumbs off your lap, and prepare yourself for the next round of wholesome peasant suffering. With any luck, the afternoon will bring a little sun. Or at least, fewer turnips. Lunch is barely over when the call goes up. Time to fetch water. You sigh dramatically, hoping someone will offer to trade chores. No one does. Even the toddler fakes sleep. Traitors, all of them. So you grab 2 sloshed together wooden buckets, one with a crack suspiciously patched with wax, and wrap your cloak tight. The door sticks, then groans open. You step into the snow-bright world outside, the air cold enough to bite your nose and question your life choices. The well is a fair walk from the longhouse, tucked down near the path that leads to the stream and, eventually, the woods. You trudge carefully, trying to avoid the worst of the icy mud. The buckets knock against your legs with each step, filling the silence with a hollow rhythm. A raven caws overhead, because of course it does, like it's narrating your suffering for some god's entertainment. You pass your cousin on the way back, her arms wobbling under a load of kindling. She gives you a pitying look. You return it with the solemn nod of the chosen water-bearer, one who knows the weight of a poorly timed leak. The well sits beneath a sagging wooden awning, rimmed with frost, the rope creaking in protest as you crank the bucket down into the abyss. The moment it hits water, you hear that glug-glug echo that means it's filled, and your arms brace for the return journey. It's heavier than usual. Of course it is. Mainstream fact, access to fresh water was critical to Viking settlements. While wells were common, in some places water had to be drawn from streams or lakes, often several times a day. And yes, carrying it was a shared task, usually falling to the unlucky or the youngest. Guess which one you are. You hoist the bucket, ignoring your groaning shoulder, and pour it into your own. It spills over the edge and down your leg, soaking into your boot. You close your eyes and let out a slow sigh that turns instantly to frost on the air. 2 buckets filled, 1 leg freezing, 0 sympathy. You begin the careful walk back, leaning slightly to one side to balance the slosh. The wind picks up and carries the smell of wood smoke, damp earth, and distant livestock. You hear a sheep bleat indignantly, which feels personal. Halfway there, you slip. It's not a dramatic, legs in the air kind of fall. It's a slow motion, 1 foot gives up, knees in mud, bucket spilling kind of collapse. You land with a squish. Water flies. Your elbow connects with something sharp. You sit there for a moment, blinking, letting the sky judge you. Then you laugh. Because what else can you do? You refill one bucket from the puddle, questionable choice, and carry the rest home, dripping and determined. You smell like a swamp now. You are the swamp. Quirky historical tidbit: some Viking communities would store snow in pits during the winter to melt later for drinking water. You think about starting a new pit. Just for you. Maybe even move in there. Start fresh. Become a bog witch. Tempting. Back at the Longhouse, you kick open the door and deliver your half-bucket triumphantly. No one applauds. Someone says, "You're leaking." You ignore them. You drop the buckets near the cooking area and peel off your soggy cloak, hanging it near the fire to steam ominously. You slump onto the bench nearest the hearth, legs trembling, heart thudding. Your grandmother hands you a cup of warm broth without a word. She knows. She remembers the water years. Steam curls from your boots, mixing with the fragrant scent of dried herbs and scorched turnip. You sip the broth slowly, letting your limbs not. Historians still argue whether Viking household chores were divided strictly by gender or by ability. In your house, it's both. If you're strong enough to lift it or fast enough to dodge it, it's your job. As you rest, the door opens again and your brother stumbles in, arms wrapped around a squirming sheep. "She got loose again," he mutters, like it's your fault. The sheep bleats. Your mother sighs. The sheep is now part of the family again, apparently. You sip more broth. Time for the second round of afternoon duties. You help your aunt patch a hole in one of the fur blankets. She's good with a needle, better with sarcasm. As she stitches, she tells you about the time a mouse chewed through her boot midwinter and she had to walk barefoot for 3 days. You're not sure if it's true, but she has the vibe of someone who has personally punched a wolf. You help rehang a curtain near the sleeping area, rubbing soot from your fingers. You straighten a pile of dried fish skins that are being turned into boot liners. You even, deep breath, gently scoop up one of the Longhouse cats and move it off the grain sack before it can pee in triumph. Small victories. Outside, the light begins to shift. Not quite sunset, but the golden hour before it. The glow filters in through the smoke hole above, catching the particles in the air, turning them into soft, golden ghosts. Everything looks slightly more magical in this light until someone knocks over a pot and reminds you that yes, you still live in chaos. You grab a broom and start sweeping again, this time with a bit more purpose. People are moving slowly now, less urgency, more rhythm. Even the children have quieted down, clustered around the old woman who tells stories with hand gestures so wild they're halfway to summoning something. You pause, letting the broom rest against your hip, watching the light catch in her silver hair and the quiet awe in the kids' faces. She's talking about a creature that lives in the ice, with eyes like stars and claws like sadness. Everyone believes her. You kind of do too. Someone passes you a fresh piece of dried apple. Sweet, slightly leathery, and better than half the meals this week. You eat it slowly. The water buckets are still damp. Your leg is still cold. But the Longhouse is warm, the fire's high, and for the first time today, no one is yelling. Not even the goose. The sun is sinking now, not dramatically, but with a kind of slow shrug, like even it can't be bothered to stay up in this long, grey winter. A soft dusk settles over the land, sneaking into every crack of the Longhouse, painting everything with smoky gold and gentle blue. Shadows stretch along the packed earth floor. You breathe in the scent of fire, wool, and wood smoke, and for a moment, the world feels hushed. Then someone farts and blames the dog. Moments over. You're in the pre-dinner lull now, that strange, magical hour where people pretend to be productive but are really just circling the hearth like lazy bears. You join them, sliding onto the bench and leaning back, elbows out, trying to look casual enough to avoid being given another task. The trick is to hold a tool but not use it. You grab a spindle. You do not spin. Your mother is cooking again, and from the smell of it, she's trying to make turnip surprise you less than yesterday. She stirs something thick in the cauldron over the fire, humming slightly off-key. She always hums when she's deep in thought or about to make someone do something they'll hate. Mainstream historical fact: Viking dinners were often stews or thick soups, made from root vegetables, bits of salted or dried meat, and whatever grains were still edible. It wasn't glamorous, but it was hot, filling, and could stretch to feed 10 people or 30, depending on how much water you accidentally added. You lean against the post behind you, watching sparks pop upward toward the smoke hole. The fire cracks like old bones. Behind you, someone is oiling a bowstring with animal fat. You hope they're doing it for hunting, not dramatic flair at dinner. One of the little ones waddles past in a tunic far too big for them, dragging a stuffed leather sheep behind them. You smile. Then they trip over your foot and faceplant into a pile of straw. You help them up, dusting them off. They give you a look that says, "This isn't over." You nod respectfully. Quirky historical tidbit: some Viking children had toy weapons and miniature tools, not just for fun, but to mimic the adult skills they'd need later. Childhood wasn't really childhood in our modern sense. You worked early, trained early, and by 10 you could be expected to carry water, feed livestock, or throw a surprisingly decent axe. A dull thud sounds from outside, followed by laughter. Someone dropped something, or someone. The door creaks as your brother comes in, brushing snow from his shoulders and triumphantly holding a limp rabbit by the ears. Your aunt inspects it and mutters, "Barely enough for a soup." Your brother puffs up anyway. "It was fast," he says. Everyone claps sarcastically. The rabbit is skinned, gutted, and dropped into the stew without ceremony. Dinner just leveled up. Everyone notices. One of the cousins starts humming the celebratory fish song, but is told to stop immediately because we are not jinxing this meal. Historians still argue whether mealtimes were solemn or festive, ritualized or improvised. From your spot by the fire, you'd say it's all of the above. Some nights feel sacred, especially feast nights, births, harvest days. But most evenings, it's just food, family, fire, and the occasional flying spoon. The longhouse dims further. Oil lamps are lit, tiny flickering flames set into carved bowls filled with fish oil and floating wicks. They cast a soft, uneven glow, turning faces into warm masks and shadows into strange companions. You watch the smoke climb up to the beams, curling around the dried herbs and smoked fish hanging overhead like sleeping spirits. Then, someone tells a joke. A really bad one. Something about a jotun, a blacksmith, and an ale barrel. The punchline is mostly fart noises. You laugh anyway. Not because it's funny, but because it's warm, familiar, and because laughter is the only real cure for a month of cold soup and goat drama. Dinner is almost ready now. The smell of turnip, rabbit, and onion fills the air, earthy, rich, and vaguely threatening. Bowls are pulled out. Spoons are licked clean from earlier. People line up in the kind of orderly chaos that counts as grace in a Viking home. You end up toward the back of the line. Typical. By the time you reach the pot, the rabbit's mostly dissolved into mysterious floating bits. You ladle out your portion and head back to your spot, dodging someone who insists the stew would taste better with just a touch of mead. They're ignored. Your first bite burns your tongue slightly. You don't care. It's hot. It's food. It's not gruel. You're in love. You dip your bread in the stew, soaking it until it's soft enough not to chip a tooth. Someone offers you a sliver of smoked cheese. You take it like it's treasure. The toddler who fell earlier tries to trade you a beet for it. You decline, politely but firmly. Conversation bubbles around the fire. Your uncle's reminiscing about the time he caught a seal with his bare hands. It was already dead, and stuck in a net, but details. Your cousin is teaching the kids a song about Thor's eyebrows. Your sister is drawing constellations in the ash with a stick, muttering about omens. You don't ask. The stew is finished, bowls licked, hands wiped on cloaks, and the air turns heavy with contentment. No one's in a hurry to move. This is one of the best parts of the day, when bellies are full, chores are done, and everyone sinks into that low, sleepy hum of shared survival. You lean your head back against the beam, letting your eyes drift half shut. The fire flickers. Someone starts braiding someone else's hair. The dog curls up on your foot, trapping you forever. You don't mind. Tomorrow will bring more chores, more cold, more arguments about soup. But tonight you ate rabbit, you didn't fall in the well, and the goose didn't bite you even once. You're basically living the dream. After dinner, the air in the longhouse thickens with the kind of warmth that makes your limbs feel like they've been replaced by something soft and heavy, like stuffed wool sausages. You lean a little farther into the fire's glow, the leftover stew in your belly radiating gentle heat. Around you, the family settles into that familiar post-dinner sprawl, cloaks loosened, boots off, spines slumped. You're not done for the day, not quite. This is the hour of mending, sharpening, braiding, and storytelling. The functional twilight of the Viking day. Not quite rest. Not quite work. Just something in between. You glance around. Your mother is darning a pair of socks, muttering under her breath in a tone that suggests whoever poked the hole is lucky to still have feet. One of your older cousins is hunched over a whetstone, sharpening a Sikh's knife with long, deliberate strokes. That sound, stone against metal, is rhythmic, almost meditative, until he slips and narrowly avoids slicing his thumb. Everyone pretends not to see. Dignity must be preserved. You pull out the wooden comb you started carving days ago. The teeth are still uneven, but now they're uneven on purpose, which is basically artistry. You whittle carefully, trying not to inhale too much of the wood dust. The dog next to you snores louder than seems physically possible. Mainstream historical fact: Viking evenings often involved repair work and small projects, patching clothes, maintaining weapons, grooming, and fixing gear. With so few daylight hours in winter, this quiet window after dinner was vital for keeping things in working order, including people. Someone sneezes. Loudly. Then again, louder. Everyone instinctively shifts 2 feet away. Your grandmother squints at the offender and makes a warding sign with her fingers. The message is clear: don't bring that plague spirit in here, thank you very much. You catch the tail end of a whispered argument about who keeps hiding the good spindle. It's the third night this week the spindle's gone missing. You suspect the cat. Or possibly the goose. Honestly, it's probably a conspiracy. The longhouse now hums with small sounds: stitching, scraping, crackling firewood. Someone starts singing softly an old lullaby about a hero lost at sea who turned into a fish to escape a sea serpent. It's both soothing and mildly concerning. Quirky historical tidbit: personal grooming was surprisingly important to the Vikings. Combs, tweezers, and ear spoons have been found in burials, clear signs that nobody wanted to look like a swamp troll, even after death. Cleanliness wasn't just comfort, it was status. You glance down at your stained tunic, then carefully comb through your wind-snapped hair with your uneven masterpiece. See? Classy. Suddenly, there's a burst of laughter from the far end of the hall. Someone's retelling the story of when your cousin fell through the ice while chasing a runaway goat. Heroic rescue is what he calls it. Everyone else remembers panicked bleating and a very cold apology. The door creaks open again, and a gust of freezing air slices through the warmth. Your father returns from the byre, smelling strongly of wet straw and mild despair. He hangs his cloak, then begins inspecting the tools stacked along the wall, making sure nothing's missing, nothing's rusting, nothing's possessed. Historians still argue whether Viking evening routines were structured or simply fill the time before sleep with anything mildly useful. In your home, it's both. One part necessity, one part theater. If you can braid a rope while spinning gossip and dodging a grumpy sheep, you're basically a multitasking champion. You help your younger brother patch a hole in his belt. He insists he's old enough to do it himself, but also insists that the needle is conspiring against him. You hold the leather steady while he pricks his thumb for the third time and mutters something Odin would definitely frown at. Eventually, the work starts slowing. Someone stands and stretches, their joints popping like firewood. Another person gently kicks the dog, who rolls over with a huff and takes up 3 times more floor space. The children are either asleep in a pile of fur or pretending to be, eyes darting open every time someone says ghost. One of the teens pulls out a string game, loops and knots between fingers, forming strange shapes that become boats, birds, or supposedly a serpent. It mostly just looks like angry yarn. Still, everyone watches. It's entertainment, after all. You finish your comb and place it proudly on the shelf above the hearth. Next to it sits a stack of antler buttons, a cracked drinking horn, and what may or may not be a dried-up toad. You decide not to ask. Someone starts retelling the saga of Bjorn Ironside, with exaggerated hand motions and increasingly terrible accents. You've heard this version before, the one where Bjorn defeats a group of bandits using only his eyebrows and a stolen oar. You settle back against the beam, grinning despite yourself. There's a rhythm to all this now, the rise and fall of voices, the occasional clang from the hearth, the rustling of cloaks and wool. Outside, the snow falls heavier, piling on the thatched roof in gentle silence. Inside, warmth flickers and dances across smoke-darkened walls. A knock at the door makes everyone jump. A pause. Then the door creaks open again, just the wind. Or so they say. You and your cousin exchange a look. You both know what else knocks without knocking. You grab a sprig of juniper and toss it into the fire, just in case. It hisses like something alive. You feel better immediately. The quiet returns. You shift closer to the fire. The warmth pools at your feet, and the drowsiness creeps in like a slow tide. Around you, voices begin to fade. Tasks are set aside. The sharpening stone is quiet. The combing stops. Someone burps softly. All is well. Tomorrow there'll be more snow, more chores, more stew. But for now, you rest in the heart of the longhouse, surrounded by kin and embers, the dark held just outside the walls by flame and laughter and long, long stories. Night has officially claimed the sky, though you wouldn't know it by looking out the smoke hole, just a deeper shade of ink out there now, speckled with the occasional star and filled with wind that sounds like it's trying to gossip with the roof beams. Inside the longhouse, the fire has mellowed into a glowing heap of coals, giving off a slow, even heat. Most of the lamps are out. The conversations have ebbed. You've entered what your grandmother calls the breathing hour. You know what that means. It's time to get ready for bed. Or more accurately, time to fight over who gets which bedding, where to sleep, and how to avoid being the one stuck next to the guy who sleep mumbles about turnips. Again, the sleeping arrangements here aren't exactly luxurious. The longhouse is one long rectangle, with people tucked in along the raised platforms lining the walls. There's no real privacy, unless you count turning your back to someone and pretending they don't exist. If you're lucky, you get a fur to wrap around you. If you're really lucky, it doesn't already smell like damp dog and boiled fish. You snag a decent spot tonight, right under the wall beam where your head won't get dripped on if the thatch leaks. Win. You unroll your bedding, which is a generous term for layer of straw, thin wool blanket, and a tunic you're pretending is a pillow. Still, it's yours. Mainstream historical fact, Viking longhouses typically had communal sleeping platforms along the sides, raised to avoid ground moisture. Families slept close together not just for space but for warmth, especially in winter when fires were left to smolder low overnight to prevent smoke suffocation. Coziness wasn't optional. It was survival. You remove your outer tunic and hang it on a peg near the fire pit, hoping it'll dry by morning. Your boots come off next. Peeling them off is like removing bark from a tree. There's a small river of relief that runs through your body when your feet hit the bare straw. Warm. Finally. As you settle into your spot, the quiet deepens. There's the occasional cough, a creak of wood, someone snoring like they swallowed a goat. You shift to your side and use your arm as a makeshift pillow, watching the firelight flicker against the rafters. Sparks crackle. The dog snores softly at your feet. You're tempted to fall asleep here, but you're not quite ready yet. Someone whispers a joke. You hear muffled laughter, then a sharp shush from your mother. Even at bedtime, some things are sacred. Then comes the scratching. You freeze. Not mice, they're too subtle. This is deliberate. Something under the platform, maybe. A hand shoots out and grabs your ankle. You nearly leap into the rafters before your cousin bursts out laughing. Classic prank. Terrible timing. You vow revenge. Possibly involving goat dung. Quirky historical tidbit. Some Viking families used iron or stone amulets to protect sleeping areas against spirits, thieves, or maybe just siblings with no sense of boundaries. You don't have an amulet. You have a pointy elbow and a bad attitude. Close enough. Someone across the room starts singing again, this time, a lullaby you recognize. Low and rhythmic, about a ship sailing across stars. You hum along softly. Even the baby in the corner quiets for a moment. You wonder if that ship is real. If it's still sailing. Historians still argue whether Viking sleep schedules were segmented or continuous. Some evidence suggests a two-phase sleep system, where people would doze, wake in the middle of the night to tend fires or pray or, gossip, then sleep again. You're not sure which kind you are yet. Tonight, you're hoping for the just don't wake up cold with someone's foot in your face variety. The fire dims further. Most of the room is in shadows now, just the occasional glow from a banked coal. You hear the wind press against the wooden walls, like it's checking to see if anyone forgot to latch the door. You pull your blanket tighter. Safe. Mostly. Your aunt mutters a prayer to Thor as she lays down. Your grandmother hums one to Frigg. Your sister just pulls the hood of her cloak over her face and mutters, if any ghosts show up, they better bring ale. You close your eyes. The sounds of the longhouse settle into their nighttime rhythm, wood creaking, soft breathing, wind moaning against the eaves. You feel your body sink into the straw, the tension from the day melting out of your shoulders, your legs finally still. And yet, your mind stays awake a little longer. You think of the stars above, of boats on black seas, of distant lands beyond the fjords, where the air might be warm and the stew not always turnip-based. You wonder if you'll ever see them, if you'll leave, if you'll stay. Then your cousin rolls over and kicks you square in the knee. You hiss. He mumbles something unintelligible and drools on his arm. You scoot 3 inches the other way, which takes you directly into the back of your father's knees. Now he grunts and shifts, sending a ripple of motion down the entire bench. This is the Viking sleep shuffle. It happens every night. 1 person moves, 5 people suffer. You sigh. You adjust. You wait. Eventually, the movements stop. The fire dims to embers. The house sighs as one, settling into its bones, holding heat like an old animal. You curl into yourself, knees bent, back to the wall. The day is done. Somewhere deep in the night, the longhouse breathes. It's not a sound you consciously notice, just the quiet creak of timber settling, the soft murmur of sleepers shifting, the slow inhale and exhale of 30-odd people sharing the same space, warmth, and dreams. You wake into that stillness not with a start, but with a half-blink of confusion. Not morning. Not even close. The world is wrapped in shadows, the fire barely a memory now, just a dim orange eye watching from the hearth pit. It's what the old ones call the watchful hour, the strange middle of the night when you wake for no clear reason. Maybe your body's too warm. Maybe the dream ended. Maybe someone nearby just kicked you in the ribs. You lift your head, blearily. Yep. Cousin. Again. You sit up a little. Not fully, not dramatically. Just enough to stretch your back and let your eyes adjust. The longhouse is darker than usual, someone must have forgotten to add a log before sleep. You can just barely make out the lump shapes of your family, wrapped in cloaks and furs like cocoons. Mainstream historical fact: there's solid historical evidence that pre-industrial societies, including the Norse, experienced segmented sleep. First sleep, a wakeful hour or two, and second sleep. People would pray, stoke the fire, tend to animals, or whisper stories in the dark. It wasn't strange, it was simply how nights worked. So now, here you are. Awake during the in-between. You slip quietly from your sleeping spot, wrapping your cloak tight and tiptoeing past the others. The fire's down to embers, barely enough to see by. You crouch and gently nudge a split log into place, careful not to send sparks flying onto someone's blanket. The log catches with a soft pop, and the shadows around the hearth shudder with renewed warmth. You sit for a while, just breathing, listening. Outside, the wind scratches at the walls. It's picked up again. Maybe snow. Maybe something less polite. The beams creak as if answering back. You look over at your grandmother. She's awake too, of course. You make eye contact and she gives you the faintest nod, one that says, "You're part of the night now." She pulls out a tiny bundle from her bedding, a bit of wool, a bone needle, and a pouch that smells strongly of dried herbs and faint mischief. She begins to stitch, silently. Her fingers work like they've always known what to do. You watch for a while, mesmerized by the rhythm, then pull out your own project, a patch of leather you meant to fix a week ago. Might as well. Quirky historical tidbit: night sewing was common in many Norse households, small, quiet repairs by firelight. But some claimed it was also when certain runes were best inscribed. The stillness between sleeps was thought to make the veil thinner, the magic stronger. Especially if you used thread dyed in midnight berries. Or, failing that, goat blood. Obviously. Somewhere, someone else stirs. You hear the unmistakable sound of someone peeing into a chamber pot with great concentration and zero shame. A few feet over, someone else mumbles half a saga line in their sleep. Then he raised his sword and, then silence. You're left on a cliffhanger. Rude. You shift your weight. Your leg has gone numb. Again. You whisper a soft curse and stretch it out beside the fire. Your dog wakes up, grumbles, licks your ankle once, and goes back to snoring. The fire crackles softly, slowly regaining strength. You and your grandmother share the space like co-conspirators. She hums, so faintly it might be your imagination. A lullaby for the fire, maybe. Or a warning to anything listening in the walls. Historians still argue whether this wakeful hour was used for prayer, practical chores, or even quiet conversation between couples. You've used it for all three at one point. Tonight, it's just a breath. A soft pause between chapters. You hear the faintest scratch at the door. Your heart does not like that sound. It's probably the wind. Or an animal. Or the wind pretending to be an animal, pretending to be a polite visitor. Your grandmother raises an eyebrow at you. You stay seated. The fire's safer. She tosses a bit of dried juniper into the flames. It crackles and releases a tangy sweet scent. Purifying, they say. Protective. She murmurs something under her breath, something old. You catch only one word, Skuggavalda, shadow wielder. You don't ask questions. You're not a fool. You finish stitching the patch and tie off the thread with clumsy fingers. It's crooked, but it'll hold. You add it to your mental list of small victories for the week, right next to avoided goat attack and won the clean bowl at dinner. You glance around the longhouse again. Most are still asleep. A few, like you, are half awake, eyes open in the firelight, heads resting on folded arms. It's a quiet kinship, this half-sleeping community. You belong to it now. The fire glows brighter. A few sparks drift up toward the smoke hole, little fireflies of warmth. You can smell the thawing of pitch in the logs. You lean back on your hands and let the heat soak your chilled fingers. You're still tired, but not in a bad way. Just heavy, settled. Like your bones finally believe they're allowed to rest. Eventually, you yawn. You look to your grandmother. She gives you that same small nod, permission to return to dreams. The kind that only come after the night has seen your face and judged you worthy of a second sleep. You tiptoe back to your spot, careful not to step on anyone's foot or tangle in a blanket corner. You curl back under your wool cover, the warmth from the fire still clinging to your skin. Outside, the wind howls once more, but softer now, like it's moved on to bother someone else. You close your eyes. You exhale. The longhouse breathes with you. You wake again not to sunlight, but to the faint rustle of straw and the smell of burning peat. The air is still dim, early dawn, maybe, or just the hour before it. No grand golden rays beaming in, no birds chirping inspirational nonsense. Just the low grey of morning seeping through the smoke hole, painting everything in muted charcoal and ash. Someone stirs near the hearth. You squint across the longhouse and see your older sister crouched at the fire pit, coaxing the coals into life with a twist of birch bark and a practiced hand. She moves quietly, shoulders hunched against the chill. You pull your blanket tighter and pretend to sleep a few moments longer. It's a sacred tradition. Eventually, the guilt or the smell of oat porridge starting to cook pulls you up. You stretch, joints popping like firewood, and yawn in the direction of your elbow. Someone mutters, "Too early for your face." You throw a straw clump at them without looking. It hits your father. Whoops. Mainstream historical fact, Vikings often began their days early, especially in winter when light was limited and chores were many. Fires were restarted, embers stirred, and breakfast was simple, usually porridge, sometimes bread, or leftover stew if you were lucky or lazy. You shuffle into yesterday's tunic, which has only a mild stew stain. Good enough. Your boots go on reluctantly, still slightly damp from the water bucket incident, still grumpy about it. You slap them against the wall a few times out of pure spite. One by one, the rest of the household emerges from their bedding piles, looking like angry trolls mid-transformation. The baby screams. Someone farts loudly. The day has officially begun. You offer to help with the fire and are immediately handed the least glamorous job, fetch kindling from the shed. Again. Apparently fire apprentice means walk outside and freeze your ears off. You sigh, grab your cloak, and push open the door. The cold bites like a fresh insult. You inhale sharply, frost, pine, smoke, and just the faintest whiff of something that might be fox pea. You trudge across the snow-packed yard to the small lean-to where firewood and kindling are stacked. The woodpile is slightly iced over. You use your breath to warm your fingers, pry loose a few brittle sticks, and head back with your arms full and your dignity minimal. Inside, it's already warmer. The fire's caught, smoke rising in that lazy spiral way that means someone did it right. Your sister nods as you dump the kindling next to her. She pokes the pot of porridge with a long spoon like she's interrogating it. You both know it's just oats, But there's hope if you stir aggressively enough. Quirky historical tidbit: sometimes porridge was left to cook slowly overnight, especially during colder months, resulting in something halfway between gruel and culinary betrayal. Some families swore by adding dried berries or fermented milk. Others preferred to forget breakfast existed entirely. You sneak a taste while no one's looking. Scalding. Bland. Slightly smoky. Perfect. Around you, the longhouse returns to life. The younger kids are running in socked feet, their hair standing in sleep-spiked chaos. Someone sings a morning charm under their breath to ward off bad luck. Your uncle spits into the fire for Thor, which is either religious or just how he likes to start the day. Historians still argue whether Vikings began their days with rituals or routines. Likely both. Some families might offer food to household spirits, whisper names of ancestors, or simply curse the cold and get on with it. This house does all three. You help set out bowls, wooden, slightly cracked, and one with a mysterious scorch mark in the shape of a goat. No one claims it. It's the haunted bowl now. Breakfast is quiet. Unlike dinner, which is raucous, breakfast feels like a truce. Everyone chewing in silence, exchanging nods, avoiding eye contact until the oats kick in. You sit by the fire with your bowl, legs stretched out, slowly thawing into something human again. Your cousin tells you the goats are restless. That probably means another fence is down. Your stomach sinks. You were hoping for a light day, maybe weaving, or pretending to organize the tool shelf. Not goat diplomacy. After the bowls are licked clean and the pot scraped dry, everyone scatters. The day's work begins. You pull your cloak tighter and head toward the small side door where tools are kept. A bucket of nails, a length of rope, and yep, the same bent hammer that's been passed around since your grandfather's knee exploded during a haystack incident. The chores will be long. The ground is still hard, the wind still sharp. But the longhouse, at least, has gone from cold shell to warm heart again. That fire at the center, now lively, now fed, pulses through everything. You look back before heading out. Inside, your grandmother is spooning more porridge into the baby, who seems personally offended by every bite. Your father is repairing a boot strap. Your sister is muttering to herself while poking the goat-marked bowl like it insulted her lineage. And you're awake. Alive. Back on your feet. The longhouse held you through the night, and now it pushes you gently into the day. You're outside again, and yes, it's still cold enough to make your bones consider unionizing. Your breath comes in puffs that hang in the air like smoke signals to absolutely no one. The snow crunches underfoot, crusted from the night chill, and the sky above is that dull, bleached gray that promises no sun, just more sky. You grip your rope and bent hammer, heading straight for the goat pen with the kind of grim determination usually reserved for raids and dental work. The goats see you coming. They know. One of them, a small, evil-eyed monster named Bruni, locks eyes with you and lets out a bleat so loud and smug it echoes off the shed wall. That's right, Bruni. You remember. You still have a scar from last month's playful headbutt. The rest of the goats shuffle around, bleating their own protest. The fence, of course, is half collapsed. Again. How do they keep doing this? Are they in league with Loki? Mainstream historical fact: Viking families relied heavily on livestock, goats, sheep, pigs, chickens, not just for food, but for trade, wool, milk, and even companionship. Goats in particular were hardy animals, suited for the tough northern environment. But they were also notorious escape artists. That part has not been exaggerated. You get to work, teeth chattering in rhythm with your hammering. The wood is damp, the nails are bent, and your gloves are a joke. Halfway through fixing the slats, Bruni tries to eat your cloak. You shove him off. He bleats again, offended. You respond with some choice words involving stew pots and goat sausages. Quirky historical tidbit: some Viking homes had goats or sheep that lived inside during the coldest nights, not as pets, but as heat sources. You're reminded of this as Bruni headbutts the newly fixed fence and tries to squeeze through. Maybe he's just trying to go home. Maybe you're the villain. Eventually, with much swearing and one heroic dive to stop a breakout, the fence is fixed. Temporarily. You're under no illusions. The goats will undo this by sundown. You stomp your way back toward the longhouse, hands stiff, nose running, dignity frozen somewhere near the fence post. Inside, the smell of something baking, a miracle, draws you like a moth. Your sisters made flatbread on the hot stones by the hearth. It's not fancy. It's barely edible. But it's warm, and that's what counts. You take a bite. It tastes like ashes and triumph. Someone's repairing fishing nets in the corner now. You're roped in to help, of course. Your fingers aren't quite thawed, but no one asks. The twine is rough and smells faintly of last season's herring. Your cousin is terrible at tying knots, but very good at loudly pretending he isn't. You redo half his work while he tells a story about a whale that followed his boat. It's unclear whether the whale was real, imagined, or a metaphor for his ex. Historians still argue whether net weaving was considered a specialized skill or just a universal necessity. Either way, you're getting pretty good at it, and now you know 5 different ways to pretend you're working even when your fingers are completely numb. Someone drops a jar. It doesn't shatter, miraculously, but does release a smell that could politely be called complex. Dried fish paste. Your aunt claps her hands and says, "Ah, lunch." You mentally reconsider your entire life path. By midday, the house is buzzing again. It's warmer now, both from the fire and the bustle. The baby's chewing on a wooden spoon with the intensity of a warrior in training. Your grandmother is brushing her hair with a bone comb, each stroke slow and deliberate. Your father is carving another peg for the roof, the old ones are starting to rot. You suspect he might be doing it just to escape goat duty. You sneak outside again, this time toward the edge of the small field where the family's root cellar is dug into the ground. The cellar door groans as you lift it, frosted wood and ancient hinges. Inside, it's cool and earthy, shelves lined with crocks of preserved food, dried fish, stored grains, pickled things in brine you try not to think too hard about. You're here for onions, supposedly. But you take your time, letting the quiet wrap around you. It's the only place with no yelling, no goats, and no chance of being asked to tie another net. You might move in. Eventually, your sister yells from the longhouse, asking where the onions are. You yell back, still growing, and grab a handful. You climb out, close the door behind you, and head back, the wind pushing at your back like an impatient parent. Inside, the longhouse is fragrant now, onion in the stew, herbs hung over the fire, and a subtle whiff of wet wool. The atmosphere has shifted again. People are tired. Faces are pink from cold and effort. It's almost time to pause. Almost. You sit, legs crossed, holding your warm cup of broth like it contains answers. The others settle too, some braiding rope, some mending cloaks, a few simply staring at the wall like it's telling them a really long, complicated joke. Your younger brother asks if the frost giants are real. Someone answers, only when you don't do your chores. He nods solemnly and returns to poking a beetle with a stick. The afternoon rolls on, measured not by clocks but by tasks completed, by the light slipping through the smoke hole, by the growing creak of backs and blisters. You close your eyes for just a moment. Just long enough to feel the straw beneath you, the hum of fire in your ears, the soft drum of life continuing in all directions. Just long enough to remember, you are warm, you are fed, and today, you beat the goat. The light outside has begun its slow, inevitable retreat, bleeding from grey to blue to something almost like smoke. Inside the longhouse, the colors shift to cooling, darkening. Everything softens. The busy clatter of tools fades. The fire hisses and pops like it knows it's about to become the center of everything again. You're finishing up the last of the day's chores, rinsing your hands in a wooden basin by the doorway, water cold enough to make your knuckles ache. You flex your fingers and dry them on your cloak, then toss the used water outside, where it freezes almost instantly in the snow. Satisfying. Back inside, the longhouse is easing into its evening rhythm, familiar as breathing. The workers return in ones and twos. Boots are kicked off, cloaks are hung up, and bodies sag with that specific exhaustion that only comes from surviving another winter day without anyone falling into the pig trough or getting trampled by an excited goat. Dinner is still a little while off, but not far. You can already smell something bubbling over the hearth, a thick stew this time, richer than yesterday. It has meat in it. Actual chunks. There's speculation about whether it's lamb, or squirrel, or the strange creature your cousin definitely caught in the woods. You don't ask. You're not picky. Mainstream historical fact: Viking households often had 2 main meals per day, one in the morning, one in the evening. The evening meal was heavier and more communal, often centered around storytelling, rituals, or games. It wasn't just food. It was connection. You settle onto the bench closest to the fire, stretching your legs out, half claiming the best spot before someone else does. The heat seeps into your bones, soothing away the sting from the cold, the chores, the arguments, the mysterious animal smells. You spot your grandmother in the corner with a small bowl and a long, polished needle. Tattooing, again. She's marking a new rune onto her own arm, slowly, carefully. You're not sure what it means, but she says it's for strength. Or memory. Or both. She once told you the body is a scroll. You just have to write carefully. Quirky historical tidbit. There's evidence some Vikings, especially women, used tattoos or skin markings not just for aesthetics, but for ritual, remembrance, or identification. Some say they used ash mixed with herbs. Others say it was just decoration. Either way, you've never seen your grandmother hesitate with the needle. Across the room, the kids are engaged in a game with bones. Not real bones, allegedly. They're rolling them like dice, shouting predictions and curses as if the outcome means life or death. One of them declares she's a seer now. Another demands tribute. You smile into your cup and sip. Someone picks up a lyre and plucks out a few notes. The sound is uneven, almost shy. Music is rare, it's not always practical. But when it appears, it's treasured. The room quiets slightly. You find yourself listening without meaning to. Historians still argue whether music in Viking homes was a common pleasure or an occasional treat, something saved for feast days and long winter nights. But here, now, it feels like a balm. Not grand. Not loud. Just present. Your cousin slides onto the bench next to you and hands you a carved token. It's your turn in the storytelling game. You roll it between your fingers, its surface smooth from years of hands like yours. You glance at the fire, then start. There was once a girl who made a bet with a Jotun. The story unfolds, shaped by your voice, bent by the smirks and laughter around you. You forget where you heard it. Maybe you didn't. Maybe it came from the bones of the house itself. Your cousin adds a detail. Your sister changes the ending. The baby claps every time someone says goose. It becomes less a story and more a shared dream, each voice adding to it like straw to a mattress. When it ends, somewhere between triumph and complete nonsense, someone calls you a liar. You take a dramatic bow and accept the title. It's one of the highest honors here, second only to didn't burn the bread. The stew is finally ready. Bowls are passed out again. The ladle makes its familiar rounds, and this time, the portions are generous. You eat slowly, savoring each bite like it might be the last non-turnip meal you ever taste. The meat is chewy. The broth is warm. You have no idea what animal this was. You do not care. Someone brings out the mead. Just a small jar, just a few sips per person. It burns slightly and makes your ears tingle. You feel it bloom in your chest like fire. Your grandmother drinks last. She toasts the house with a nod and pours a few drops into the fire for the gods, or the ancestors, or maybe just the mice. The stories pick up again, now slightly slurred, slightly louder. The fire burns higher. Faces glow in the flickering light. You catch your reflection in a metal bowl, eyes half-lidded, cheeks pink, hair a mess. You look exactly like someone who survived the day and might survive tomorrow too. Then someone farts and blames Bruni the goat. Bruni is not inside. The laughter is immediate. Eventually, the talking fades. The liar is set aside. The bones are gathered. The bowls are rinsed, or at least wiped clean with a bit of straw and wishful thinking. Bedding is unfurled again. People stretch and yawn and argue softly over who stole whose blanket. You take your place again near the wall, next to the same wooden beam, under the same scratchy fur. Your body aches in the best way. Used. Alive. The fire dims. The house sighs. You close your eyes and let the warmth wrap around you like a song remembered just in time. This time, when sleep comes, it clings tighter. Heavier. You drift into it like a canoe sliding onto still water, no splashes, no fanfare, just silence pressing gently in on all sides. The longhouse is nearly motionless now. Just the occasional cough, the shuffle of someone rearranging themselves in their furs, or the fire exhaling a soft puff of smoke into the rafters. The heat is lower now, deliberately so. Too much fire at night, and the air gets smoky. Too little, and people wake up frozen to their own blankets. The balance is delicate, but the house knows how to breathe through the dark. You're in that strange place between dream and wakefulness when you feel the shift. Not a noise, not quite. More like a tension in the beams. You crack one eye open. Just enough to confirm, no ghosts. No frost giants. No Bruni. Only a figure by the fire, your mother, maybe, or your aunt. She stirs the coals slowly, feeding them a splinter of birch bark. There's a rhythm to it, like she's telling the flames a story in code. You close your eyes again. Mainstream historical fact, night maintenance of the hearth was common in Viking homes. Someone always stayed close to the embers, ready to stoke them back to life if the cold crept too far in. The fire was not just for heat, it was for safety, for continuity, for spirit. Eventually, the stirring stops. The longhouse settles again. You dream. Or maybe you remember. Of summer grass underfoot. Of a hunt by the river, where the birds laughed and the sun touched everything golden. Of your grandmother's voice chanting old songs while weaving charms into your hair. Of that time the cow escaped into the village bathhouse and made national news for about 5 minutes. Quirky historical tidbit, Viking dream interpretation was a serious affair. Dreams could foretell death, victory, the weather, or which of your relatives was most likely to turn into a bear. Some dreams were considered gifts from the gods. Others were seen as warnings. You try not to think too hard about the one you had last week involving a chicken, your uncle, and a very loud thunderstorm. The house creaks. You stir again. The fire is low, almost gone. Just a faint red beneath the ash. Dawn can't be far now. You feel the faint pulse of cold returning to the room, sneaking in at the edges, brushing across cheeks and fingertips like an early guest at the door. Someone snores. Someone whispers in their sleep, probably arguing with a goat again. The baby shifts and sighs. You don't move. You don't want to. Everything in your body feels weighted, but not in a bad way. More like you've sunk into the longhouse itself, into its wood and straw and smoke, part of the bones now, part of the breath. Historians still argue whether Viking longhouses had formal divisions between sleeping and living spaces, or if the entire home simply ebbed and flowed between states, living, working, resting, as needed. Looking around now, you're convinced it was the latter. The house is its own being, pulsing through cycles just like the people in it. You hear the first sound of morning birds. Faint, but real. It's almost time to rise again. The others will start to stir. Someone will complain about their back. Someone will remember they promised to chop wood and pretend to forget. Someone will shout about the porridge being too watery, while someone else quietly adds snow to it to make it go further. You stay in the stillness just a little longer, letting it linger, letting your breath slow, letting your senses drift like ash on air. It has been a full day, a hard day, a normal day, and you've made it through chores, goats, frost, stew, and all. That's worth something. That's worth everything. You smile faintly. The kind of smile only half-asleep people make. You pull your fur a little tighter, tilt your head toward the fire's final ember, and let yourself go. Not forever. Just for now. Just until the snow outside remembers to melt and the rooster starts screaming again. Which, honestly, will probably be in about 5 minutes. Now, the longhouse is still. Your eyes drift shut, lashes brushing the rim of your cheek as your breath evens out. The cold presses lightly at the edges of the room, but it doesn't reach you. You're wrapped in warmth, in the scent of smoke and wool, in the softness of worn straw beneath you. Around you, the walls creak and murmur like old friends settling into sleep, and the rafters above hold strong, heavy with the weight of the night. The others are sleeping, too. Each tucked into their little corner of shared dreams, each wrapped in fur and silence. You hear nothing now but the breath of the house, the hush of coals, the ghost-soft wind curling past the door like a lullaby. The world has narrowed to this, your heartbeat, the fading warmth on your skin, the stillness of a place that has held families for generations. Everything important is inside these walls. The chores can wait. The questions can wait. Even the goat can wait. Let the longhouse hold you now. Let the fire forget your name. Let your body drift where it wants to go, slow, slow, even slower. You are safe here. You are still. You are home. Sleep, little one of frost and flame. Sleep, and let the old gods keep their watch. Sleep, and wake when it is kind to do so. Good night.